So I want you to just take a second and look at your calendar right now.
Oh, that's usually a pretty painful exercise for most people.
Right. I mean, look at your calendar and then go look at your bank account. Because I have a really piercing question for you today. Are you making a living or are you actually making a dying?
Wow. Yeah, that cuts right to it.
It does. Think about the sheer volume of finite time on this earth that you are actively trading away. And ask yourself, are you doing it just to buy things you don't even have the time or, frankly, the baseline physical energy to actually enjoy?
Well, I mean, that is the defining paradox of the modern American professional class, isn't it? We exist in literally the most affluent society in human history.
Yes, surrounded by capital.
Exactly, surrounded by unimaginable convenience and capital, yet you look around and the overarching psychological baseline is just it's chronic stress, it's perpetual indebtedness and total exhaustion.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive goes straight to the heart of that paradox.
Mm.
We are unpacking the fully revised and updated edition of a total personal finance classic, Your Money or Your Life.
Oh, such an incredible text. Originally by Vicki and the late Joe Dominguez.
Yes, and this new edition actually features a foreword by Mr. Money Mustache,
Mhm.
who, is one of the modern pioneers of the FIRE movement. Financial independence, retire early.
Yeah, and we really need to set the parameters for this discussion right out of the gate here.
Please do.
Because, look, this is not a lecture on skipping your morning latte to achieve some superficial millionaire status. People completely misunderstand this book.
They really do. They think it's just a budget guide.
Right. But it is a profound, almost ruthless philosophical framework, and it's just disguised as a 9-step financial program. Treating this as a mere budgeting guide completely misses the architecture of what they're trying to do.
100%. Because having $5 million in a Vanguard brokerage account means absolutely nothing if your daily existence is just this miserable grind.
Yeah, a grind that compromises your health, your marriage, your relationship with your kids.
Exactly. The underlying objective here is reclaiming what they call your life energy. And the methodology to get there, and this is my favorite part, it's structured almost exactly like a rigorous corporate restructuring.
But applied to the individual, which is brilliant.
It really is. And that corporate audit framework is exactly how we're going to approach this deep dive today. Yeah. I mean, if you look at a Fortune 500 company's quarterly earnings, like Apple or NVIDIA, there is absolute transparency.
Oh, yeah, Wall Street demands it.
Right. You see the gross revenue, the operating expenses, the exact net profit margin. The board of directors demands that precision. But when high-earning professionals manage their personal lives, we'll call, you Inc., that rigorous accounting just evaporates.
It completely vanishes. We tolerate a level of financial illiteracy in our personal lives that would instantly get a corporate CFO fired.
Fired on the spot.
Absolutely. So to fix that, the authors force you into this brutal, unfiltered assessment of your historical data. Before you can alter your trajectory, you have to execute a complete financial archaeology of your past.
Which leads us to step one. And I was genuinely staggered by this assignment when I first read it. The mandate is to go back and calculate your total lifetime earnings.
Every single penny.
Literally every penny you have ever generated. We are talking about the W-2 from your high school summer job lifeguarding, the 1099s from that random freelance consulting gig you did 5 years ago.
The under-the-table tips from bartending in college, all of it.
Yes. You tally that massive cumulative gross revenue number, and here's where the pain starts. You calculate your current net worth.
Right, which is your liquid cash, equity in your home, investments, minus all your debts, your actual balance sheet.
And the psychological shock of comparing those two numbers is profound. I mean, what do people usually find here?
Well, for a large percentage of high-income earners, they realize that millions of dollars have literally flowed through their hands over the past couple of decades. Millions.
Just pass right through the system.
Right. Yet when they calculate their actual liquid net worth, they have virtually nothing to show for it. Or, even worse, they have a negative net worth because of leveraged consumer debt and massive mortgages.
It totally exposes a catastrophic churn problem. You realize, wow, I am a highly capable revenue-generating machine with a 0% retention rate.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You're Amazon in 1999, but without the long-term master plan. But placing those two numbers side by side objectifies the money. It strips away all the emotional baggage.
Which is so hard for people to do.
It is. We are conditioned to use money as a proxy for our self-worth, right? Our status, our value to society. But when you see that you've earned $3 million in your lifetime and only retained $50,000, you stop tying your ego to your salary.
You have to. or you'd just break down.
Exactly. You start viewing your financial life as a system with a massive leak that needs engineering, not moral judgment. The book emphasizes a no shame, no blame approach for this exact reason.
No shame, no blame. I love that. The past is just raw data.
Right, it's just data.
So once you've confronted that historical data, the immediate question becomes, well, where is the leak? How are we bleeding this cash on a daily basis?
And that requires looking at the actual currency we are spending, which, as the book points out, isn't dollars at all.
It's time. This is where the authors initiate a massive paradigm shift regarding the definition of money itself.
Yeah, this is step 2, and it's probably the most important concept in the entire book. Most economic textbooks define money as a medium of exchange, a unit of account, or a store of value.
Very academic.
Right, very macro. But Dominguez and Robin discard all those macroeconomic definitions. They redefine money on a purely existential level. Money is simply a physical representation of the life energy you traded to acquire it.
Because our time is finite. I mean, the actuarial tables suggest a 40-year-old has roughly, 350,000 hours of life remaining?
Somewhere around there.
And when you factor in sleep and basic human maintenance, your disposable life energy is incredibly scarce. It is an irretrievable resource.
Once an hour is gone, you can never buy it back. Even Warren Buffett can't buy more time.
Exactly. So when you internalize that money equals life energy, your entire framework for capital allocation just fundamentally changes. You stop looking at a luxury car like a new Tesla or whatever and thinking, oh, that costs $80,000.
Right, you look at it and compute, that vehicle costs 3 years of my unrecoverable life energy.
It's sobering. But to make that calculation accurate, you have to determine the exchange rate. And this is where the book introduces the concept of the real hourly wage.
Oh, this exercise systematically destroys the illusion of the salaried professional. It's brutal.
Let's walk through it. Because a standard calculation assumes, okay, I have a $100,000 salary. I divide that by 2,000 working hours a year. Boom, I make $50 an hour.
But that $50 an hour is just your gross revenue. It completely ignores the operating expenses of maintaining that job.
Right, so what does the actual math look like?
Well, the actual math requires you to add all the unpaid hours your job demands to your baseline time, and then subtract all the job-related expenses from your baseline pay.
Okay, let's run a modern scenario for our listeners.
Yeah.
Because you don't just work 40 hours. You have to factor in the commute, assuming you are hybrid or fully in office.
Yeah, if that's an hour each way in American traffic, that's 10 unpaid hours a week. Just gone.
Gone. Plus, add in the time spent answering Slack messages on Sunday evening just to prepare for Monday morning meetings. Add the time spent decompressing, literally just staring at a wall for an hour after a brutal client call so you can function as a normal human being again.
Yep. The decompression time is huge. Suddenly, that 40-hour commitment is actually 60 or 70 hours of life energy dedicated to the maintenance of that employment.
And then you apply the financial subtractions, right? You deduct the commuting costs, gas, wear and tear on the vehicle, tolls.
You deduct the professional wardrobe. You know, the expensive suits or the specific Silicon Valley Patagonia vest you only buy to adhere to corporate culture.
Don't forget the high-margin convenience meals. You order via DoorDash because you were just too exhausted to cook after those 60 hours.
Oh, and you even subtract the escape vacations, the premium you pay for an all-inclusive resort simply because you desperately need to anesthetize yourself from the burnout of your career.
It's crazy. And when you divide that adjusted, much lower net pay by the much higher actual hours committed, that $50 an hour illusion just completely collapses.
It does. You might discover your real hourly wage, your actual net profit margin on your life energy is closer to $15 or $12 an hour.
Which means you are operating a high-revenue, desperately low-margin personal enterprise.
Exactly. You are a terrible business. And that realization forces a radical reassessment of your purchasing power. If your real hourly wage is $15, a $150 dinner isn't just a casual Friday night expense anymore.
It is 10 hours of your life energy. You are trading a full day and a half of your existence for one meal.
It makes you pause, doesn't it?
It makes you stop dead in your tracks.
Yeah.
And to make that real in your day-to-day life, the book mandates that you track every single cent that enters and leaves your life.
Mm-hmm.
Every single penny must be accounted for.
Which is where a lot of people push back.
Yeah, and I'm going to push back right now. Because, I see the philosophical appeal of this, but realistically, we are living in an era of plaid integrations, right? We have AI-driven budget apps like WineAB or Monarch Money.
Sure, everything is digitized.
Right, it's categorized automatically. If I'm a busy executive, Manually tracking every single transaction feels like a terrible use of my leverage. Doesn't automation solve this problem way more efficiently?
From a purely logistical standpoint, yes, absolutely, automation is more efficient. But this is where behavioral economics completely supersedes logistical efficiency.
How so?
Because automation removes the psychological friction of the transaction. If an app just categorizes your spending silently in the background while you sleep, you are effectively sleepwalking through your financial life.
You never feel the pain of the purchase.
Exactly. The mandate to manually track, or at least consciously review and manually input transactions daily, it builds a behavioral speed bump at the exact point of sale.
I guess it's kind of the difference between wearing a smartwatch that tracks your calories automatically versus having to actually write down every single thing you eat in a physical journal.
That's a perfect analogy. The friction of the journal makes you stop and ask, do I really want to eat this donut if I have to document it?
Right. Do I want to write down one glazed donut in my own handwriting?
The friction disrupts the conditioned reflex of consumerism. You are forced to acknowledge the trade-off in real time. Successful wealth builders, like the truly wealthy, consistently demonstrate this hyper-awareness of their capital outflows.
So the tracking is not about restriction at all. It is about establishing a baseline of absolute financial consciousness.
Yes, you can't optimize what you aren't consciously aware of.
Okay, so once we have that real hourly wage and we have the raw data from tracking, the next frontier is figuring out the return on investment of those hours. Because if we are trading our finite life energy for dollars, we need to measure the exact ROI.
But not in stock dividends, in actual human fulfillment.
Yes, step 3 and 4. And this requires completely discarding standard budgeting templates.
Totally. Arbitrary categories like housing 30% or food 15%, obscure human behavior. Standard categories tell you what you bought, but they don't tell you why you bought it.
They don't capture the nuance.
Right. So the methodology here involves creating bespoke, personalized spending categories based on your tracked data.
I love this part. Because instead of a monolithic entertainment category, you might break it down into meaningful experiences with my kids versus mindless stress relief subscriptions I never use.
Exactly. Or instead of just food, it's high-quality groceries versus sad desk lunches I buy because I forgot to meal prep.
The sad desk lunch is such a real trap.
It really is. And these bespoke categories act as a mirror reflecting your psychological state. At the end of the month, you tally the dollars spent in each category and convert them into hours of life energy using that real hourly wage we just calculated.
Seeing that you spent 30 hours of your unrecoverable life energy on sad desk lunches is a visceral wake-up call.
Oh, it makes you sick to your stomach.
Yeah.
And it leads directly to evaluating that spending against the fulfillment curve, which honestly is perhaps the most brilliant behavioral concept in the entire book.
Let's break that down for the listener. Imagine a graph where the horizontal axis represents money spent and the vertical axis represents fulfillment. Let's use software development as an analogy here, since so many of our listeners are in tech. Think about the life cycle of a great application. When you first start building it, adding basic features like login, core functionality, it provides massive utility. The value of the app skyrockets.
Yes, and that mirrors the early stages of the fulfillment curve, where you are spending money on basic survival, food, shelter, clothing. The fulfillment return on those initial dollars is immense.
But as you move past survival into what they call comforts, a more reliable car, a higher quality mattress, the fulfillment curve is still rising, but the slope is less steep. You're getting diminishing returns.
And then you hit luxuries. The curve flattens out significantly. You are still gaining some marginal utility, but it costs a lot more money to move the needle on your happiness.
But just like with software, if you keep adding features endlessly, you don't get a better app. You get software bloat.
Exactly.
The app becomes sluggish, confusing, and prone to crashing. The user experience actually degrades.
And the fulfillment curve operates on the exact same mechanism in your life. There is a specific peak on the curve called enough.
Enough. Just sit with that word for a second.
At the zenith, your desires are perfectly met. You are optimally fulfilled. Any spending beyond enough actually pushes the curve downward into the territory of overconsumption and clutter.
Because the additional things you buy require maintenance, right? They need insurance, storage, mental bandwidth.
Yes. The possessions begin to manage you. They degrade your baseline happiness while continuing to drain your life energy. You are spending money to be stressed out.
We fall into this trap because American hyperconsumerism actively attacks our internal metric for enough. I mean, the marketing apparatus of the entire U.S. economy is designed to convince you that the curve goes up forever. Buy the bigger house, get the boat, upgrade the Tesla.
Right, and to combat that marketing apparatus, the book requires you to interrogate every single bespoke category on your monthly tabulation with 3 specific questions.
The 3 questions, let's hit them.
The first question is purely transactional. Did I receive fulfillment, satisfaction, and value in proportion to the life energy spent?
Meaning, if you traded 30 hours of your life for those sad desk lunches, did you receive 30 hours of corresponding joy or utility?
Exactly. Usually the answer is a hard no.
Right. And the second question is about alignment. Is this expenditure of life energy in alignment with my values and my life purpose?
This one catches a lot of people off guard. If you identify as someone who values environmental sustainability and local community, but your spending data shows a massive outflow to fast fashion conglomerates and overnight global shipping, well, you are operating without financial integrity.
Your capital allocation completely contradicts your stated identity. It's hypocrisy on a spreadsheet.
It is. And the third question is the ultimate diagnostic tool.
This one is my favorite. How might this expenditure change if I didn't have to work for money?
Oh, it isolates the spending that functions purely as a coping mechanism for your employment.
Right. If you were financially independent, would you still be paying for dry cleaning corporate suits? Would you still need a premium subscription to a meditation app to deal with the anxiety your boss induces every Tuesday?
Probably not. It strips away the camouflage.
It totally does. But, and I have to play devil's advocate here, let me challenge the core premise of enough from a macro business perspective.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because when ambitious professionals, especially American entrepreneurs, hear the word enough, they often associate it with complacency. Doesn't settling for enough kind of kill the drive to build, to innovate, to create the next Amazon or NVIDIA?
I see where you're going.
I mean, if Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos had simply decided they had enough after their first few million, the technological advancements of the modern world literally wouldn't exist. Does this philosophy inadvertently suppress high achievement?
It is a profound misconception to equate enough with the cessation of ambition. That's a huge trap. The framework doesn't cap human potential. It redirects your capital and your bandwidth.
Redirects it how?
Think about it. When an individual is trapped on the consumer treadmill, their ambition is highly localized and essentially enslaved to retail therapy. They are grinding for a promotion merely to upgrade their lifestyle overhead from a BMW to a Porsche.
So their ambition is just funding their own software bloat.
Precisely. By curing that endless consumer desire and establishing a permanent ceiling on personal overhead, your definition of enough, you generate immense free cash flow and cognitive surplus.
You aren't stressed about making the mortgage on a 10-bedroom house.
Right. You're no longer spending your weekends managing the logistics of your clutter. It frees up the runway.
It provides the ultimate leverage. I mean, do we genuinely believe Elon Musk sleeps on the factory floor because he wants to buy a nicer watch?
Obviously not. The ambition of world-class founders is directed toward asymmetric problem-solving and massive value creation, not personal overconsumption.
Right. Defining enough on a personal level provides the unshakable financial foundation required to take massive entrepreneurial risks.
Yes. You can bootstrap a startup or pivot to a highly meaningful but maybe lower-paying career precisely because you aren't held hostage by an inflated lifestyle burn rate.
So curing the consumer disease actually fuels higher-order ambition. It's not about being lazy. It's about being focused.
Exactly.
Okay, so once you've calibrated that fulfillment curve and trimmed the bloat, you need a system to ensure you don't relapse. In the corporate world, a startup founder lives and dies by their burn rate dashboard. They know exactly how much cash is bleeding out and how many months of runway they have left.
Right, the metrics are front and center.
And the author suggests creating the personal equivalent of this dashboard, which they call the wall chart. This is step 5.
Yeah, you literally plot your monthly income and your monthly expenses on a large physical graph, and it needs to be prominently displayed in your environment. As you implement these principles, the expense line begins to drop and the income line hopefully rises.
The visual representation of the expanding gap between those two lines, it triggers a very primal, positive feedback loop.
It does.
Yeah.
Because that gap represents your retained life energy. It is the visual manifestation of your growing freedom.
But look, any sudden shift in operational efficiency comes with relapse risks. We see it in corporate cost-cutting all the time. A company slashes R&D and marketing to boost quarterly numbers, but eventually the core business suffers and they have to overspend just to catch up.
Oh, absolutely. And in personal finance, this manifests as what the authors call the purge and splurge cycle.
Which mirrors the psychology of extreme dieting, right?
It's exactly like extreme dieting. When people realize their expense line is too high on that wall chart, they often react with punitive restriction. They just cut all discretionary spending instantly. No more going out, no more fun.
But operating in a state of continuous deprivation requires immense willpower. And willpower is a highly exhaustible cognitive resource.
Yes, and when the willpower inevitably depletes, the snapback effect is severe. They binge spend, often accumulating more debt than they started with.
To bypass that purge and splurge cycle, the framework demands a complete redefinition of frugality. This is step 6. And in standard American culture, calling someone frugal is basically adjacent to an insult.
It implies cheapness. It paints a picture of someone who tips poorly at restaurants, wears worn-out shoes, and refuses to turn on the heat in the winter to save $50.
Right. But the book reclaims the concept entirely. Frugality is not about deprivation. It is the absolute optimization of joy and efficiency.
The authors use this clarifying metric that I love. If you own 10 dresses and you wear all of them frequently and derive genuine joy from them, you are practicing frugality.
Because you are extracting maximum value from the life energy you traded for them.
Exactly. Conversely, if you buy 10 dresses, leave the tags on 5 of them in the back of the closet, and feel guilty every time you see them, you are highly wasteful.
Waste is determined by a lack of utility and enjoyment, not by the sheer quantity of possessions.
True frugality is a marker of high financial intelligence. It involves substituting creativity for capital.
What does that look like, practically?
It means researching durable goods rather than buying disposable ones, leveraging shared community resources, and most importantly, refusing to pay the premium for brand name status signaling.
Well, status signaling is the elephant in the room here, right?
Yeah.
Because we operate in highly visible, status-driven professional ecosystems.
Definitely.
Whether it's Silicon Valley, Wall Street, or a high-end law firm, there's an implicit uniform. The Tesla, the specific Patagonia vest, the right zip code, the private schools for the kids.
You're expected to play the game.
If you start practicing aggressive, creative frugality, there's a very real fear that you will look like you are failing to your peers.
Yeah.
Can you actually decouple from that status game without suffering professional consequences?
The pressure is undeniable, I'll give you that. But it requires zooming out to observe the behavior of the truly wealthy versus the merely highly compensated.
That's a great distinction.
Yeah, and the FIRE community has actively flipped the script on status here. Within those circles, hyperfrugality and a 60% savings rate are the ultimate flex. It demonstrates an immunity to the marketing apparatus.
It shows you can't be bought.
Exactly. Furthermore, true wealth often operates with profound stealth. Look at Warren Buffett. He has resided in the exact same Omaha home since 1958. Charlie Munger drove a standard vehicle for decades.
Because the reliance on external status symbols is usually an indicator of high cash flow but low net worth.
The truly independent recognize that the highest status symbol isn't a luxury asset. It's the ability to walk away from a toxic job on a Tuesday morning because your capital sustains you.
It's the ultimate FU money. And you don't get there by buying depreciating assets to impress people who aren't even paying attention to you anyway.
Perfectly said.
And there is a macroeconomic layer to this efficiency that the authors highlight through a concept called pogonomics, which is referencing the old comic strip character Pogo, who famously said, "We have met the enemy and he is us."
Right. It addresses the reality that our personal financial balance sheets do not exist in a vacuum.
Wow.
They are inextricably linked to the global ecological balance sheet.
How so?
Well, every physical dollar you spend is essentially a lien on the Earth's resources. The production of every single consumer good requires raw material extraction, carbon-intensive manufacturing, global logistics, and eventual waste management.
So by optimizing your expenses and curbing overconsumption, you are unilaterally reducing your carbon footprint.
Yes, it completely bypasses the greenwashing of buying expensive, eco-friendly products. The most sustainable, ecologically sound economic decision is almost always simply buying nothing at all and maximizing the life cycle of what you already own.
You preserve your life energy and reduce the extraction demands on the planet simultaneously. It's a win-win.
It really is.
However, optimizing the expense side of the ledger only takes you so far. There's a hard floor to frugality, right? You still require food, shelter, and healthcare.
You can't budget your way to zero.
Exactly. To radically accelerate the expansion of the gap on your wall chart, you must subject your earning potential to the same ruthless optimization. We have minimized the outflow. Now we must maximize the inflow. This is step 7.
And doing this requires decoupling two concepts that society treats as identical: work and paid employment. This distinction is an absolute lifeline for anyone suffering from corporate burnout.
Let's define the difference because in our cultural vernacular, when someone asks, "What do you do?" the conditioned response is just your job title.
Right, I'm a marketing director, or I'm a lawyer. We conflate our identity and our core purpose with our W-2, but the framework argues this is a profound structural error. Work is defined as any activity you undertake that aligns with your values and purpose.
So raising a child is work.
Yes. Maintaining a community garden is work. Writing a novel that never sells a single copy is work.
And paid employment.
Paid employment has one primary intrinsic function. It is simply the exchange of your finite time for financial capital. Nothing more, nothing less.
I look at this through the lens of a high-end B2B consulting firm. When a firm like McKinsey or Boston Consulting Group engages a client, they don't get emotional about the client's mission. They assess the immense value they are providing, and they aggressively price their services to capture that value.
Right.
The book is effectively telling the listener to adopt a mercenary mindset regarding their salary. Because paid employment is strictly a commercial transaction of time for money. You have a fiduciary duty to yourself to extract the absolute maximum compensation the market will bear, provided it doesn't compromise your health or ethics.
You have already established how precious your life energy is. Discounting the price of that energy in the open market is a failure of self-valuation.
But let's look at the edge cases here. What if a listener is a public school teacher, or a social worker, or an artist? For them, their paid employment actually is their life's calling. Decoupling their identity from their paycheck might sound deeply cynical or alienating to someone who genuinely loves the mission of their organization.
It appears cynical on the surface, I agree, but strategically, the decoupling is what actually protects their passion.
How does it protect it?
When your entire identity and sense of purpose are fused to your employer holds your self-worth hostage. If a nonprofit loses funding and cuts your program, or a school district mandates a curriculum you find abhorrent, you are psychologically devastated because your purpose was structurally altered by external forces.
Your identity is completely at the mercy of middle management.
Exactly. By separating the two, you establish an emotional firewall. You can say, I am a teacher. Teaching is my life's work and my true calling. But this specific school district is merely my paid employment.
Oh, that's powerful.
If they refuse to compensate me fairly for my life energy, or if the environment becomes toxic, I will take my work, my passion for educating, and deploy it elsewhere. You'll teach in a different district, launch an online education platform, or build a private tutoring business.
It totally eliminates the emotional blackmail that organizations often use to underpay passionate people. You refuse to subsidize their operational budget with your life energy just because you believe in the mission.
Yes. You act as the ruthless CEO of your own human capital. You negotiate aggressively, seek promotions, or pivot industries specifically to maximize your free cash flow.
Because when you combine that maximized income with the optimized frugal expenses, you begin to generate massive operational surplus.
Right. In corporate finance, this is high free cash flow. In personal finance, this surplus becomes your capital.
Which brings us to steps 8 and 9. The final phase of the framework is deploying that capital strategically so that it eventually scales to replace your life energy entirely.
The holy grail of the entire philosophy.
The crossover point. This is where the math of the wall chart becomes exhilarating. How is a crossover point actually calculated?
It relies on a fairly straightforward formula applied to your accumulated capital. You take your total invested capital, multiply it by the expected long-term safe withdrawal rate or interest rate, and then divide that number by 12.
And that figure represents your monthly investment income.
Correct.
So keeping the math simple,
Yeah.
if you have accumulated $300,000 and we use a conservative 4% yield, that generates $12,000 a year, or roughly $1,000 a month in passive, life energy-free income.
Exactly. You plot that monthly investment income as a third distinct line on your wall chart. As you continually funnel your surplus capital into investments, and as compound interest accelerates the growth, that investment income line arcs upward.
Meanwhile, your conscious frugality keeps your expense line flat or trending downward.
Yes. And the crossover point is the exact literal intersection on the graph. The day your passive investment income line crosses above your monthly expense line, you have achieved financial independence. Paid employment is no longer a mathematical necessity. You have completely bought back the remainder of your life.
The modern FIRE movement, heavily influenced by figures like Mr. Money Mustache and the updated Forward, utilizes a very specific rule of thumb to pinpoint this horizon. And it's derived from the Trinity study. Let's unpack the Trinity study, because it's basically the bedrock of modern retirement math. What did it actually prove?
So in the late 1990s, professors at Trinity University ran exhaustive Monte Carlo simulations against historical stock and bond market data going all the way from 1926 to 1995.
They were looking for the safe withdrawal rate.
Right.
That's right.
They wanted to determine what percentage of a portfolio a retiree could withdraw annually, adjusting for inflation, without ever depleting the principal over a 30-year horizon, regardless of market crashes.
And the magic number was 4%.
Yes. The math dictates that to safely withdraw 4% of your portfolio to cover your living expenses, you need an accumulated capital base equal to 25 times your annual expenses.
This highlights the staggering exponential power of reducing your expenses. I mean, if your unexamined lifestyle requires $120,000 a year to maintain, you need $3 million in capital to hit the crossover point.
That's a huge mountain to climb.
But if you implement the audits, cut the bloat, and realize your enough only costs $60,000 a year, your finish line drops to $1.5 million. Cutting $1 of expenses doesn't just save you $1. It reduces your required capital burden by $25.
It drastically accelerates your timeline to freedom. But the critical evolution of this framework lies in where that capital is deployed, because the financial ecosystem has fundamentally transformed since Joe Dominguez originally designed this program.
The historical context is crucial here. When Dominguez retired in 1969, and when the book dominated the 1990s, his primary investment vehicle of choice was U.S. Treasury bonds. Why? Because the macroeconomic environment was wildly different.
Very different.
During the late 70s and 80s, you could purchase government-backed, essentially risk-free Treasury bonds, yielding double-digit interest rates.
It was an anomaly of high inflation and central bank policy. An investor could lock in a 10% or 12% yield on a 30-year bond. You could literally park your capital in the safest asset on earth and live off the massive interest yields without ever touching the principal.
That era is completely extinct. We spent the last decade and a half in a ZIRP environment zero interest rate policy. Even with recent rate hikes, parking your entire nest egg in Treasury bonds for a 40-year early retirement is financial suicide, because inflation will silently evaporate your purchasing power.
So how did the modern FIRE practitioners adapt the original framework?
The updated edition incorporates the strategies of modern financial independence advocates, groups like the Bogleheads, heavily inspired by Vanguard founder Jack Bogle. Because the bond yields collapsed, FI practitioners were forced out onto the risk curve into equities.
And what's the consensus strategy?
The modern strategy relies heavily on low-cost, broadly diversified stock market index funds, meaning you aren't trying to outsmart Wall Street by picking the next NVIDIA or shorting a dying retail chain.
No, active stock picking, even for hedge funds with armies of quants, statistically fails to beat the broader market over long time horizons.
Warren Buffett proved that with his famous million-dollar bet against the hedge funds. Instead of trying to find the needle in the haystack, an index fund allows you to simply buy the entire haystack. You own a fractional piece of the thousands of companies that make up the U.S. or global economy. You are betting on the perpetual macro growth of human productivity.
And you do it while ruthlessly minimizing fees. A 1% management fee charged by a traditional financial advisor doesn't sound like much, but compounded over 30 years, it can cannibalize a massive percentage of your total returns.
But shifting the strategy from risk-free government bonds to the equity markets introduces a massive psychological hurdle.
Volatility.
We lived through the 2008 global financial crisis, where portfolios were cut in half. We saw the intense, rapid crashes during the pandemic. If your crossover point is dependent on the S&P 500, what happens if the market experiences a 40% drawdown the year after you quit your high-paying executive job? The technical term is sequence of returns risk. Doesn't this expose your life energy to the terrifying whims of global panics?
Sequence of returns risk experiencing a severe market contraction early in your retirement phase is absolutely the primary threat to this strategy. But the FEI framework doesn't rely on blind faith in the market. It relies on a layered defense system. You mitigate the risk through structural architecture.
Walk us through those defense layers. What's the first one?
First, the framework mandates establishing a cushion, a highly liquid reserve of cash or cash equivalents sufficient to cover 6 months to a year of living expenses. If a severe bear market hits, you pause withdrawals from your depleted equity portfolio and live off the cushion, giving the market time to recover.
So you avoid locking in the losses by selling at the bottom.
Exactly. Second, you possess an inherent superpower that the average retiree does not: expense elasticity.
Because you've already mastered frugality.
Right. Because you have mastered creative frugality and understand your exact fulfillment curve, you can instantly scale down your burn rate during a recession without experiencing psychological trauma. You already know how to live a deeply fulfilling life on less capital.
And the third layer.
The third layer is purely psychological. It's the reframing of market mechanics. When the broader market drops 30%, the financial media induces mass panic. The FI practitioner, sitting on their cash cushion with a multi-decade time horizon, views it entirely differently.
They see a macroeconomic blowout sale.
Precisely. The productive assets of the global economy are suddenly priced at a deep discount. It is an opportunity to deploy surplus capital, knowing that historically every single market crash in history has eventually been eclipsed by a subsequent all-time high.
It requires internalizing the detached, analytical logic of a CFO. You don't panic. You execute the strategy.
You trust the math.
Man, this journey we've outlined today is dense. We've moved from excavating decades of old tax returns to calculating the true depressing cost of commuting. We've built personalized fulfillment metrics, graphed our financial survival on the wall, mercenary-priced our salaries, and finally bought the entire stock market haystack to force those lines to cross.
It is a total operating system replacement for your financial life. The authors conceptualize the completion of this journey as moving through 4 distinct phases of FI.
Let's crystallize those 4 stages as our ultimate takeaway for the listener. Walk me through phase 1.
Phase 1 is financial intelligence.
No.
This is the brutally honest X-ray. It's the historical tracking, knowing your real hourly wage, and understanding exactly how many hours of life energy you are bleeding into the economy.
Okay, phase 2 is financial integrity. This is the alignment phase. It's interrogating every transaction and ensuring that your capital outflows are perfectly synchronized with your internal values and your highest fulfillment.
Phase 3 is financial independence. This is the mathematical reality of the crossover point. It is the accumulation of sufficient capital and the optimization of expenses, to the degree that paid employment transitions from a mandatory survival mechanism to a completely optional pursuit.
And the final phase, which is rarely discussed but arguably the most important.
Phase 4 is financial interdependence. Once you have secured your own survival, once you have definitively reached enough, your aperture widens. You are liberated to look outward.
You can give back.
Yes, you can dedicate your immense surplus of life, energy, time, and capital to your community, to the ecological health of the planet, to solving systemic problems. You transition from focusing on self-preservation to executing massive global contribution.
That is the profound philosophical payoff of this entire exercise.
Yeah.
The ultimate lesson of your money or your life is that true wealth is completely divorced from a specific dollar amount. True wealth is the absolute uncompromised sovereignty over your life energy and your time. The money is nothing more than the functional tool used to purchase your freedom from the hamster wheel.
It's an audit that fundamentally changes your relationship with reality.
So we've given you the tools to restructure you, Inc. But before we close this deep dive, I want to leave you with a stress test. A thought experiment to mull over as you commute to work or sit in your next pointless meeting.
Oh, this is a good one.
Imagine you construct your wall chart this evening. You plot the data, and by some impossible miracle, you realize the lines have already crossed. You have hit the crossover point. You never, ever have to trade your time for a paycheck again. Your baseline survival and comfort are permanently funded by your capital.
The financial pressure that has dictated your entire adult life simply vanishes.
Exactly. Here's the piercing question. What exactly do you do this coming Monday morning? When the alarm clock isn't required, when there is no bots to appease, when you don't need to generate a single dollar of revenue, where do you go? What do you build? Who do you serve? If you look at the blank canvas of that hypothetical Monday morning and you feel panic, or if you simply draw a blank, then you have critical work to do that has absolutely nothing to do with index funds or budgets.
Because if you don't know what you are retiring to, the financial mechanics are irrelevant. The capital can buy your time, but it cannot invent your purpose.
Start the audit today. Track your next purchase and ask yourself if it is worth the irreversible trade of your life. Take control of the balance sheet, buy back your Monday mornings, and reclaim your life energy. Thanks for diving deep with us.